Just don't quote me out of context.
Yeah, so how was that for everyone? I guess the first question is, does it make sense?
Yeah, I thought it had a lovely pace to it. Yeah, it's a bit of an eye-opener to a bloke in his late 50s, what you lot get up to, but it's like a documentary for me. It was quite cool. No, I thought it had a nice pace. I to it. I like the, once you've settled into Lynn both doing the acting and doing the narrating, I thought that, it settles into it. I thought it worked really well.
Yeah, I really enjoyed reading it, and I'm very proud of Danny. My one question was, am I right in thinking that time turns back? Time turns back. So that scene at the start, we come back to that halfway through, but we see it more fully, what they talk about fully. And then from there, we go chronologically to the end.
Yes.
I'm
not convinced by the placement of that first scene. I sort of just, I banged it in there to try. I don't know how I feel about that first scene really. But yeah, so from then on, like you're like, it starts in 97 and it ends in 99.
Okay, yes. I think if I'd have been able to like read the script more rather than doing, getting it up to the screen, I would have got that.
Yeah.
But it was a little moment of like, I'm not sure if it needs more clarity, but I thought it was worth saying.
That's fair enough.
Yeah. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed like playing the relationship that Jen and Lynn have. I think it's really nice. I wonder if, this might not help if you're trying to make it shorter, but I wonder if some of the chunks of dialogue kind of explaining what they're doing could become scenes, possibly. I was thinking more at the beginning, when they're on that first night out together, and I wonder if like we could do like the cue or just seen it basically, or put it as dialogue instead of narration. I feel like there might have been some moments where there was an opportunity, but possibly not. Just a thought.
One of my, I've already talked a little bit to Danny about this from having read sort of the most recent draft, but not quite this one. One of the things that I think needs looking at is, obviously I've got dozens of notes that are little and broad, and in that first act, working out who is telling the audience the story. With direct address, you've always got to know why they're telling the audience anyway. But I think having some of those moments as scenes instead of direct address, I think there's a load to play with in the first act, basically, between those two girls, because Jen talking to the audience then has us questioning where Jen is in time and who she's talking to and why. And so if we make a rule that it's just Lindsay, and there's one line that the dad says that's to the audience later as well that I made a note of. If it's just Lindsay, that slightly changes the load that you've written. If you allow other people that permission, that's fine, but then you have to know why they are allowed to talk to the audience as well. So we've got to play with what the rules are there.
And I thought the thing with the dates, that at the moment, I think that's potentially confusing. Because we're reading it, we can see the dates, so you get the gist of the timeline. But if you were just somebody listening or watching it for the first time, I don't think you'd get that. It may sound, hang on, the repeating dialogue. I don't think it signposts that time switch enough. I mean, we get it because we're seeing the dates every time you get to a new chapter. But I think you need to either play it straight or do something that highlights that it is a shift in dates.
Yeah.
That was one of my thoughts, whether if it's important to know the dates, whether and it might not be, I don't know, but that might be a design provocation to see if there's a kind of way we could do that visually. but then also even just, I'm not sure if in like the first couple of pages it actually tells us that we're in the 90s.
It says it's the election and John Major's going out, but it doesn't say the date.
Yeah, it talks about New Labour, but a bit further in.
Yeah.
So I think, again, it's like, is that going to be in like the marketing? Is that going to be in the, you know, really clear in the aesthetic? Is that going to be really clear in the music? Like, is there, yeah, or does that need working in to make it clear that it's like, this is the date, this is the era, or or maybe some like context stuff like earlier on about like the kind of world and what's going on in that point of history, for example.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions like that? Any other kind of things that didn't make sense, or things that were potentially like missing links between anything for anyone?
In on the kind of topic of times and dates, I didn't know what Ledger Week was, and I don't know if it's explained in the text. And I'm sorry.
If you're from Donny, you'll know exactly what Ledger Week
Well,
is.
yeah.
But if we start touring, then
yeah, that was it. I felt dumb for not knowing.
So I also didn't know.
I presume it's something to do with the horse race event.
Yeah.
The big...
So maybe in that bit where I say Donny has the best race course, we have Ledger Week. It's every September. Really just signpost that. Yeah.
I guess I eventually did work out it was to do with the horse racing. So if you're kind of happy that people piece it together as they go along, then you know that's also fine.
Okay.
I must admit, while you were doing your duologues, I was looking up Doncaster on Wikipedia and just reading about it. It was quite fascinating. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Makes you want to know more about Donny.
Just on a general like comment, I think all the description of all of the places is so like beautifully rich, and like I was totally transported. Like in my head, I was imagining like what all these places look like in every little detail, and all the, you know, it's like a real like description of all the senses and what we're smelling and the sticky doors and all of that, which is just really beautiful and amazing. And I think once we start talking about the design and stuff, then it'll be really interesting what we want to show, but what we want to show and what we want to tell, like, and the kind of difference. We'll kind of dig into that a bit deeper. But, yeah.
And what I liked about it is, although it's a kind of love note to Doncaster, I imagine it resonates with whatever town you're from. Every town has those areas and those strips, and the bit that you don't go, and the bit that's fun, and the queuing up for the taxi rank at the end of a messy night. I thought that worked really well. And although it's obviously very specific about Doncaster, I can see people identifying that wherever they're from. You know, every town's got these little areas. So I think that will resonate with lots.
That's good. So it might be tourable.
Yeah, just change Doncaster's to wherever you're playing.
Yeah. Wigan is the best night out.
Wigan is the best night.
Yeah, oh, that's good. And I'm also glad that you thought it was a love letter to Doncaster, Mark, because that was one of our big, we workshopped it in Donny last year, and that was one of the big concerns for everybody, that my own stigma about Doncaster didn't come through. So I'm hoping that's maybe been cleared up, gang? ? Lauren?
I mean, I've said from the first draft that I think the imagery of Doncaster is brilliant.
Okay.
And the imagery is the right word. Like, especially the Butcher Road bit always sticks out to me because people that live on Butcher Road are absolute dickheads. But it's just like bits like that, and Charisma and like Silver Street, like it just rings true. And like, you know, talking about bits like Ledger Week, they'll be funny because that's home for the people that it opens to and people in Donny. But I think as well, like everyone said, there are parts like that everywhere. So I think it does have a universal appeal as well. But it does need to retain that sort of, I'm talking about this place. It's happening here. but also maybe feed in some more universal elements so people can see in Bawtry Road that part of Sheffield or that part of Leeds that.
Yeah, that's right. Every town's got a Bawtry Road where the posh people live, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you totally get what that road represents from the way they talk, and you have an image of that road in your mind when you're reading it. And I think, like, I'm not from Donny, so I didn't know like a lot of the references, but it kind of makes you like, it didn't make me feel alienated. It made me feel like I want to be in the club and like I want to know what everything is, and I think an audience would feel like that as well.
It's like talking about charisma and like sticky floor and all that. Like, how many friends have you got from other cities and towns that go, oh, well, you know, that club, it's sticky floor. Like, it just resonates to other people. So, yeah. Cracking.
And what I liked is by the end of the play, Doncaster itself has moved on as well. One, you've aged those few years. It's only been a few years, but that's quite a leap in your development, and the town centre's not the same. Now, part of it maybe is the town centre's not the same. Part of it is you're a few years older kind of thing. And I think that taps into everybody's feeling of growing up when they move out of the getting pissed out your head stage, and they look fondly, you know, you have mixed feelings about looking back on that bit. And I like by the end of it that the early part of the play nails a certain time and place, and then that's there and you've moved here looking back on it. I thought that came across really well. I really like that.
When we were doing the interviews and stuff, there was a lot of people who basically said exactly that. Like, whenever they happened to be 16, 17, 18, 19, 20 was the best period in Doncaster's history, and everything after that has been shit. And everyone it's like, oh no, it's the 80s, it was the 70s, no, it was the 90s. Like, everyone we spoke to, depending on how old they were, there was a precise time which just happened to coincide when they were the age of the characters in this play. And I thought that was really great that it came across in this, that, like that ambiguity of has it changed, has she changed, and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I like that.
Definitely. Yeah, and it's that really clear, that feeling of like when you're reaching a certain age and people around you are moving on, and if you aren't, and also just that uncertainty about what the hell your life is going to be, which is how you feel when you're that age, regardless of what time in.
And it's that thing of when you're that age and you have a best friend, and it gets that awful bit, and it is usually when one of the people is going on to further education and the other one isn't. There's that horrible moment when your best friend's not your best friend anymore, but you don't quite know the point when they stop being your best friend. It's just, you see each other a bit less, and then it's I got quite nostalgic for that. That kind of tapped into a few emotions as well. I think of like my best friends from that age, and I think, Christ, while you were doing it, I was thinking, Christ, I haven't spoken to so-and-so for like 20 years. But yeah, I thought it taps into, I think it will appeal to so many people. It really plays with lots of different emotions, which is good.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Mark, actually. Obviously, I found it really easy to write the girls because I know them. But like the dad, did I write old man acting? And B, like, did I, like, I don't know, do we need more Terry? Like, do we want a bit more of Terry's backstory, or is...
In that you're trying to trim half an hour off of it, I guess not more Terry. I know what you mean, though. He's obviously the least fleshed out person, and the mum's not really expanded upon, apart from that she walked out 10 years before, kind of thing. So no, I don't think so. I mean, in some ways, yes, he's obviously an underwritten character, but I think he serves the purpose of the plot in the story you're trying to tell.
Okay.
But even when you're out and off the rails, he's your kind of constant. And it gets across that even when he's trying to please you as a dad, and you have that conflict, that you you kind of resolve it. So I don't, as much as from an actor point of view, I said, oh yeah, give us a lot more lines and backstory. I think it serves what you're trying to tell in the story you're telling, to be honest.
I think he feels seen through her eyes, in terms of like the way 16 or 17-year-old girls don't really see their parents as like fully formed people with lives outside of their interactions with them. So I think like that's how it reads to me, is less that he's kind of underwritten, but more that like
it's from her point of view,
considered by Lynns, if that makes sense.
Well, I remember when I was 15, my mum and dad and my brother was, I was 15, my brother was 11, my sister was 8 or something. I remember parents sitting us down and tell us they were getting divorced. And I remember thinking it came from nowhere because I was oblivious. I was just out playing with my mates all the time, and that's kind of how you see your parents. They're just that, your mum puts the food on the table, you see your dad at the weekend. And at that age, you are very wrapped up in your own little lives. And so I think you're right. I don't think you need to write more of the dad because it is through her eyes at that stage in her life.
Okay, thank you.
Danny, did you have other questions for us hearing it out loud for the first time? Was there anything that kind of...
God, I guess it's like the age-old one maybe of like, Eek Robson. Don't know how that stuff, how subtly and how, I don't know how well that was sewn in and where the holes are. And if we get enough information or we get too much now, I don't know where I'm at with the Robson storyline of it.
Sorry, can I just clarify what's the...
Sorry, so Robson is the man, the bouncer man who is mentioned in the play.
That shagged 1,000 women?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Who is a real life person. Obviously dead,
Okay.
but...
I guess the useful thing would be, Miss, what did you understand about the real life story? If you don't know who he is, then rather than us telling you, if you tell us what you got from it, that's probably the most useful thing.
That's great.
So I got that he shagged 1,000 women in Doncaster on nights out, didn't know who they were, didn't use protection, and therefore contributed to the spread of AIDS in Doncaster. And that Doncaster specifically, compared to Britain, was like AIDSville.
AIDS Central. And did he, when you say he died, I take it he died of the AIDS, did he?
Yeah.
Is there any reason you don't actually mention his name anywhere?
I sort of didn't want to give him a platform, but I do talk about him a lot more now than I had intended to. So, and also, I think you can just go away and Google that if you really wanted to find out. I think this has got to be more about, I want it to be more about the people of Doncaster rather than him specifically.
The only thing I thought was a little bit confusing is when you first start getting into that about the bouncer, it takes quite a while before you know what you're talking about, before the viewer knows what you're talking about. Like, okay. It's dad showing you a magazine article, but the audience can't see what we're looking at. And so that's the only thing I thought was a little bit clunky, because it didn't, I mean, as it goes on, you piece other bits together and you realise what you're talking about, but it was a bit confusing that first. I think that's the first time it gets a mention, is when the dad's trying to show the article in the newspaper.
It is, yeah.
I don't.
Nobody knows what we're talking about at that point, so I don't know.
Yeah, I did also with that scene. Like, one thing I wondered was, is Danny more aware of the political and gendery problems of that than Lindsay? Do you know what? Does that make any sense? Because your view and your articulateness comes through quite strongly in that scene with your arguments back to your dad. Like, do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's not the only time in the script that Lindsay's shown to have opinions and to be smart. So I don't necessarily think it's like, oh, it sticks out, because there's other scenes as well where she's shown to be quite socially and politically engaged.
Well, the only reason I like that from my character's point of view is I think it's good to have that scene where you do see the father and daughter clashing.
Yeah, and the male and female in a way as well.
Yeah, I think if you took that out, then the dad would become a bit too much of a cipher. It's it's the two of them under the same roof. I like to see a scene where they are, they're not getting on and they're not agreeing and they are having a go at each other. But I know what you mean from the point, the bouncer.
Can I jump in on that point that Melissa made? That part for me did feel like it was in more of a Danny's voice. No. Mom, I'm on the phone.
Oh, sorry.
Hi, Anne. Danny says hi. It did sound more like it was in Danny's voice rather than Lynn's. And it's not that I feel like Lynn isn't articulate or hasn't had opinions till this point, but it kind of feels like it's coming from a 2020 female's voice rather than a female voice of 1997. And I wonder if that's just the tone of it or the language that's used.
Is this in all of the sort of conflicty scenes, Lauren, or is that the first? Is it the first time that it's mentioned with the paper? Is that the one we're still on about?
It was towards the end. I didn't note down exactly where it was, but sorry, 1 second. I'm going to go to the living room. It's the bit where she's talking about it's synonymous with such and such. That's the line that I highlighted. Because I just thought that stuck out to me as like, would Lynn say it like that? And I'm not a writer, so that's why I sort of flagged it in my thing, because I was like, I just didn't know if it was the structure of it or what of the tone. But after listening to the back and forth with Melissa just now, it kind of feels like it's potentially that it's coming from a perspective.
It's also a bit preachy. I'm telling you the point.
It is a little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit, but that's okay, because that will come. That's not a big issue. At least, like, what it is you're trying to say, so that's fine. But yeah, I don't know if it's a voice thing or what that is, but that's how it felt for me. Potentially a Danny opinion of 2020 that might not have been as formed in that way from Lynn in 97. I
think I was conscious of that. Me and Joe had a conversation about, like, maybe way back when, about how this play is sort of relevant today, and also the fact that, like, condom sales dipped massively like a year after. It's sort of like Donnie didn't learn, so it's that really tricky line of being like, cool, so I'm going to tell you about the relevance of this now, but also it's a really fine line. You mentioned the scene that you like, the scene, Mark, where they fight, and that's absolutely all Ruby. That was props to Ruby, that she was like, they need to hate each other, so she's great.
Otherwise just a nice guy in the armchair every time you get home after a night out kind of thing. No, well done.
Yeah. I know what you mean about that. How do we wrap it up without it being preachy? I guess I'll figure that one out.
Yeah, I think it comes down to, and we already know this from knowing what this draft is right now, but it comes down to the fact that because the Robinson events happen so quickly, they all have to be in that one chunk of the play that is only 15 minutes out of an hour and a half. And it just means that everybody has to give us so much information so that we have all that information, which is why, as part of a bigger conversation that we'll have a bit later, it could be fun to mess with the structure again, to just see if that you can distribute that weight out so that you don't have to have a 15-minute section near the end that feels quite didactic, like you're telling the audience what happened. And because you've only had a couple of weeks to draft this since your first draft, you're trying to do 5 different jobs with those scenes with the dad at the moment, and that's just because it's early stages. So it's good to know that we all feel this way a little bit, but it gives us something to work with, which is really useful.
But I guess it comes where it comes, because I figure 2 things are your trigger for your glory years ending. One is Jen going and doing her own thing, and 2 is the incident with the bouncer that turns a night out in Doncaster on its head, and nothing ever quite goes back to as it was before, kind of thing. So it is a pivotal point of the play. But I see what you mean about maybe eking the information out.
You might have already been trying to do this, but I wonder if, like Mark's saying, is that the point that she starts questioning, like, the problematicness of some of the stuff that happens on nights out, some of the stuff that happens between men and women on nights out? Is that, like, for her as a character, the first time that she...
I think probably, yeah.
Is it? And then in that case, would she have such a good argument yet ready? Because do you know what I mean? Like, when you're going through your own feminist awakening...
Still waiting for mine, but
you accumulate your views, kind of, but maybe not. I mean, I'm also not a writer, so I'm spitballing. I'm just gonna stop talking now.
No, we love you. God, that's gonna be well hard. How am I gonna do that?
That's what we've already done.
It'll be fine. Did you have any other questions, Danny, from hearing out loud? Anything else that was...
Yeah, I think mine was mainly the Robson stuff, and Rube's just touched on, like, the heavy weightiness of that. Yeah, I think I'm good for questions.
What, Danny, the only thing I would say is what length are you aiming for? You're looking like an Edinburgh kind of hour and 10 minutes?
I want it to be like 70 minutes, but with fuckloads of music. So I'm just going to have to cut like at least 40 minutes of the show.
Oh.
I want loads of dancing.
So what you're saying is realistically, it's going to be longer because you want to put more musical bits in.
But I think the scenes will really, really dip. Like, and it's definitely the first act. Like, although it's the longest, I think it will take the shortest amount of time. Hopefully, if we do it right. I don't know. Yeah.
I mean, the reason second drafts are always this long is because you've built really big characters, you've got all their backgrounds, you've got all the context, you've got everything in their relationships, and so the first thing writers do is just get that all on the page because it's really important, and then the second draft is going, well, I can get rid of some of this, but maybe we need more of this, and then from this point on you can go, oh, actually this scene already says that without them having to say all that stuff, and you start trusting the audience to, and so you've done the like throw everything down, and now you can start pulling it back and the information's still there because you've got it and we've heard it. So so you'll cut so much, you won't believe how much you'll end up cutting and still have all the information that we've had in this draft. So
yeah,
is there anything specifically that everyone was like, oh my god, you've said that 10 times now?
Well, just as a broad thing in that you've got to cut a chunk of it, I think it would be the earlier bit where you get what a messy night out in Donny is like, but you kind of do a messy night out in Donny about 3 times. So I think if you're going to make us say, I mean, I liked all of it. I mean, but in that you are trying to trim it down, I think you kind of do establish that early on. And then we live through quite a few nights out in Donny and get the feel for what your life's like. So I think that's where you probably, when you look at it with a view to, with your editor's hat on of trimming it down, I think you'll probably be able to knock a bit off in that bit, because I think after that the story is quite concise and everything has a kind of purpose. So I personally think that's probably where your saving will be, in whittling some time off. And also with the visuals, like somebody else was saying, with the visuals, when you it's not just you describing a night out in Donny. Once you get the staging and the visuals, and we can visually see a night out in Donny, like I think you were saying, Mel, you were saying, maybe a bit more acting the scene rather than narrating the scene. You probably can get rid of a chunk of the narration and just show it. We can see it.
Yeah. And is that where we need to shave most of the time from the narration?
That's where I would think, but
building your part, Mark.
No. I'm just
Terry needs a monologue. Yeah.
Danny, I did like the bit about you putting Uncle Kev, a line about Uncle Kev at some point. I thought
Did you?
Yeah, I picked up on that.
Mark played my Uncle Kev in the show that we were in together, so.
Yeah. I did like that you mentioned Uncle Kev in a line. Yeah.
My dad, when he lived in Doncaster, used to, Park Lane was where he went out. Like, so saying it's full of horny old people like Uncle Kev, I felt was a personal attack.
Yeah, grab a granny night. Yeah, I love it. Yeah.
Do we have anything else to say specifically about the script, or shall we maybe say goodbye to Mark and Miss and we can move on with the production meeting? If anyone has anything more kind of specifically about the reading rather than about like next steps for the show, then say them now.
No, I thought it was, I'd just like, before signing off, I'd just like to say hi to all of you. And Danny, thanks for getting me included in this, because I've been going stir crazy at home these last few months with the lockdown. So it was really nice to feel like an actor again for a couple of hours.
Oh, thanks, Mark.
Thank
You
you
were
so much.
great. You read so well.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. Also, thank you for getting me involved, because yeah, good to have something to do. one thing a month to do. And yeah, well done, Danny. You should be really proud. It's sick.
Oh, thanks, Miss. I could cry. Yeah.
And yeah, nice to see you all.
Yeah.
Enjoy the next stage of the chat.
Yeah, I'm gonna sign off. But thanks for everything, and good luck with it. Keep me in the loop, because I love to know what you're doing with it. And I thought it was really good. I really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Thanks,
Right.
Miss.
See
Bye,
you
all.
guys.
Thanks for coming. You're the best. Bye, guys. Oh.